Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this installment of Cerdant Bytes today, where we take some time to chat with technology professionals and leaders about all things technology and cybersecurity and all programs supporting them. And today joining us is Lauren Wiege from SonicWall, Director of Global Programs. Hi, Lauren.
Hey, how you doing? Just remember, always remember, you can get wiggy with it, okay? We're good.
I was gonna say, like, I pronounced that correctly, right?
You did fantastic.
Well, we're gonna get wiggy with it with you today.
All right, sounds great.
On all things money. You know, money talks, and money is important to everyone right now. But this conversation is particularly pertaining to all things funding and federal funding as it relates to K-12 and higher ed. So you are the man with the knowledge at SonicWall, is that correct?
Well, you know what, I can help guide our way through it. There's so many things out there happening in education right now. You know, you look back a couple of years, education funding was kind of anemic. It was ERate. That's all we had. And, you know, come March of 2020, boom, you know, all of a sudden there's billions of dollars out there. And yeah, I want to talk to you about some of these cool programs that are out there to be able to fund some technology solutions for education and help push those guys forward.
Amazing. Well, you know, Cerdant has worked with K-12 just about since the beginning of our time in 2002. And I can certainly attest to the fact that ERate was the only thing out there. And, you know, now all of a sudden, a lot of people are learning how to navigate lots of new waters. Of course, COVID brought that in many, many ways, but, you know, funding to compensate for many things was one of them. And the funding has, you know, been amazing, but one of the most difficult things for people has been figuring out how to navigate it, how to properly apply for it, and what applies to them and what doesn't. And so, you know, obviously SonicWall has been a great partner for us in doing so. So I'm hoping to dig in. And really topic number one that I wanted to touch on is really the different funding buckets, because as things have unfolded since last March, there are, you know, it kind of started with one and then it went to another, and then, you know, it's really snowballed, which again, is great because additional funding continues to become available, but it's also muddied the waters. So I feel like it's a good place to start to just kind of establish what different buckets we're talking about, what's available, what's not available at this point in the game.
All right, so we'll dive into this. So this really, when I'm talking K through 12, there's 5 separate funding programs out there. Back in March of 2020, the GEAR, or Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, was established. And ESSER, which is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, was established in March of 2020. Now, the Governor's Education Relief Fund was first stocked up with $3 billion. That particular fund is for the governor to use at his discretion to help out education and remote learning. ESSER was more designed for K through 12, and the money was based off of the Title I funds that the schools received back in 2019. So they took the Title I funds that the schools received in 2019, and that's what they used as the benchmark for the original ESSER fund, which was $13.2 billion. Now, these two funds can be used for anything, okay? Anything technology-wise. There's no limitation on this. So whether it be something to do with client, cloud, firewall, remote access, anything can be used with these two funds. Well, Congress went back to work, okay? December 2020 rolled around, and we saw another emergency relief fund come out. And that was the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund round 2, okay? Now, this particular fund, which was part of the CRSA Act, put another $52.8 billion, $52.8 billion into ESSER 2 funds. Now, ESSER 2 funds can be used for the same thing ESSER funds can be used for, anything technology-wise. Now, don't get me wrong, these funds aren't just specifically for technology. It's to help support the schools, but there's a whole lot of money right there. So then, you know, this last March 2021, we saw this huge bill get signed into law, which is the ARP plan, the ARP, So within ARP, there are separate buckets of money. Now, ARP in itself is a $122 billion fund. I mean, just looking at all this money, you're like, oh my goodness.
I know.
So ARP itself is a $122 million fund. In that particular fund, there are certain buckets that we want to take a look at. The Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is a $7.1 billion fund, is a fund to help make sure that schools are connected and we're taking care of out of classroom learning, okay? In those funds, when you look at the SonicWall solution, and I'm just kind of playing with the SonicWall solution right now,
right.
Our access points or Wi-Fi solution is the only thing that qualifies within the ARP program, okay? But within the ARP program, there's another $350 billion assigned to tribal communities to help fortify tribal communities, a very underserved part of our community, by the way. I highly recommend folks get involved and get out there and help take care of the tribal nations. But $350 billion for tribal nations. There's another $2.75 billion for non-public schools. And let me back up. ESSER 2 also supplied $2.5 billion for non-public schools, so private schools. So each one of these tiers supplies another level or different level of funding. And then we still have ERate. Okay, let's not forget ERate.
And then there's still ERate, yeah.
And then within ERate, don't forget, SonicWall, we play within category 2 in ERate, which is firewalls, switch, and access points. Right. So those are the 5 main K-12 budgets, but then you also have a support fund called HER, H-E-E-R, okay? And that's the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. So there you go. There's a mouthful. There's a lot of funding out there.
It's a fire hose. It's not surprising. It's not surprising that the information gets so easily. It's hard to navigate at all. And just from a personal question perspective, obviously you've worked in this area for a very long time. Have you been shocked by the reaction of the federal government in making funds available and making them available so quickly and rolling it out so quickly? Because it seems to me like the reaction was swift and it also came in waves when it needed to come. I mean, has that been your observation and a little bit of shock as well?
Yeah, I would say yes. And what's interesting, again, kind of what I opened up with is it was anemic. Up to a year and a half ago or so, the funding was really anemic. It was ERate. And now there's just an enormous amount of funds available, but it's needed funds. If you look at the infrastructure with our schools, if you look at our capabilities to truly do off-campus education, and if you look at the hybrid type of solutions we need in today's education, we're behind the 8 ball. So although there's a lot of money coming at us with a fire hose right now, it's such a needed thing for us to really fortify our education processes and capabilities across the board.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's crazy that it took a global pandemic to make it happen, but I think it also forced people to think in different ways and in a lot of different areas. So if that's what it took to, to get education funding up to speed, then we'll call it a silver lining, right?
Yes.
Yep. So, when we work with our K-12 customers, both public and private, we feel like there are a lot of, there's a lot of misunderstood funding info. One of the most common things that we've run into is the understanding that or just the knowledge that there are separate buckets for education enablement. So things like educational programs, applications, additional technology in the classroom, but also, to your point, connectivity and infrastructure buckets. So that's one. I was hoping you could touch on that one a little bit, as well as what you believe or what you have seen as other common misunderstandings or just misses in general in the funding.
That's such a great question, because we talk to folks every single day and they're like, I had no idea I even have funding. I think the message getting to the individual educators and the schools and districts that are out there that can participate, it hasn't gotten there. And a lot of the folks don't know. And that could be COVID related, it could be remote related. It's hard to say. But that's the biggest thing is we've called people and they've said, well, no, that's part of the general fund. And it's not part of the general fund. You have a budget, you have money, your organization has money. And that's the one thing that's been very eye-opening for me is that folks just don't even understand what they have. Now, there's some interesting tools. I mean, SonicWall, we put together some FAQs that we send out and we help people get educated, but also the United States Board of Education, they put out a national website that's a very great resource where you can log into your individual state. You can drill all the way down to an individual school and actually find out how much money do you have in gear, ESSER 2, and these funds, and it'll help walk you through how to actually apply for those funds. Now, another thing is people don't understand, well, how do I apply for those funds? Every individual state has a state board of education. That state board of education basically oversees and controls that funding grant mechanism. Mm-hmm. So everyone's a little bit different. Some are a little easier than others, but that's how you get to that funding windows or those funding streams to help supply funds for those upgrades that are needed across the board.
Nice. And, we've definitely seen that, like I said, Cerdant works with a variety of different school districts in different parts of the country and of different sizes. And we've found, and this is the case anywhere, right? In any business, private, public, in any setting, is the more collaborative the groups, the easier path to this funding that we've seen. The school districts that have very, very close relationships from the teachers in the classroom to the people on the technology side, the technology coordinators, to the infrastructure teams. We've put together lots of different focus groups within some of the school districts that we work with to really kind of help mediate and moderate the conversation and say, okay, what makes the most sense for everybody? What do the teachers in the classroom need to deliver and, to deliver the message both internally to the people that are back in the classroom, but also the students that have chosen to stay remote. Most, many school districts have spun up remote learning, obviously, because they absolutely had to, but have decided to keep it around. They've built the infrastructure for it. They've seen that it works for a certain subset of the population that has chosen to stay remote. So I really think for most of these school districts, that remote learning is here to stay. So kind of putting the infrastructure teams with the classroom teams, and obviously with the procurement side of things, the people that are doing the applying and talking about where does the infrastructure need to be to best support what's in the classroom and outside of the classroom. I mean, those, of course, are our dream scenarios, and it's something I wish, we could replicate across all environments. But I think, at least from our perspective, that's where we've seen the easiest path forward. And I think, I obviously can't name any school district specifically, but I think one of the most innovative solutions I've seen anywhere is something that we, built with a SonicWall solution, was really kind of looking at an area that is truly underserved from a wireless connectivity standpoint and a funding standpoint, and building out the wireless infrastructure so that it could legitimately serve people coming to the building in cars to legitimately learn from their cars to get a Wi-Fi signal where they otherwise could not get one at home or in their, when they live very remote and things like that. So I just really think it's kind of amazing what people have had to do with this and how they've come together to reimagine how best to take advantage of this funding.
You bring up a couple of really great points, and I really wanted to highlight a couple of things. And one is when the pandemic hit, a lot of schools and districts, they were able to spin up and do the remote learning. But the one thing that they couldn't do was secure it. That was the last thing they thought about, is securing those networks. And then the next thing you know, something very inappropriate happens in the classroom when you're doing either a hybrid model or all remote model, and somebody's doing something weird or somebody hacks in. And, we've heard about some of those situations where in a Zoom call, something inappropriate happens or whatnot. So it's great that in a lot of schools' cases, they've gone out and they've spun up that piece of it. But now they really need to take a look at security, and they really need to take a look at some of the SIPA laws that apply to this type of thing, and making sure they're compliant with that. So great call out on that. And they're able to do that now, okay? They can secure and they can have performance. It's, in the past, people thought, oh, if it's security, I'm handcuffed, I don't have performance. Well, that's just not the case.
Right.
And that's why SonicWall loves working with Cerdant so much, is because we're working with a group of professionals that really understand and get involved with their customers and really figure out the who, what, whys, and wheres, and that puts together a solution that really is holistically right for that organization. So.
Right. Well, and that's why we love, a little bit of a love fest, going on here. But that's why we also love working with SonicWall, especially in the K-12 environment, because, no two environments are the same. Security does not exist in a vacuum. That is clear. And, it never has. And certainly with this situation, it just, to use an already overused term, but it's more true than anything, but the perimeter is blown way out. It doesn't exist anymore. But just SonicWall's ability to adapt and be flexible and be malleable to the different environments and to work, to play nicely with all of the different applications that we know are in play and things in and out of the environment's control is, it's been the perfect tool in our toolbox, obviously, since we opened the doors, especially in K-12 and higher ed.
Outstanding.
So you mentioned a few resources, the state resources, like you said, every state does it a little bit differently from an application standpoint, but the federal government in general has also created a really great resource where specific funding by school districts can be looked up. What resources are missing? Either public resources or resources that SonicWall specifically has created to just make it easier to find information.
Well, we've put together an FAQ that can help answer questions on what can be funded with which fund and where do you find this fund and that piece of it. And we'll make sure that you have that and you can share with your customers and that you can help them understand where to guide and go. But, really the biggest part that I would like to express to everybody is that there is funding. Don't let anybody tell you there's not funding. There is funding, and there are different streams. So you have different abilities with each fund. And when you're looking at that gear, that ESSER or that ESSER 2 fund, anything applies. Anything in the SonicWall portfolio applies. So you can get out there and really build the right thing for the end user. And then when you're looking at the ARP ESSER, well, there's different buckets within ARP. And there's different things that apply. But when you're looking at that emergency connectivity fund and you're working with those customers or those schools are thinking, I want to go after the emergency connectivity funding, well, SonicWall can support them with our Wi-Fi product in that. And then naturally with ERate, you guys know ERate. Everybody knows ERate pretty well, firewall, switch, and access points once again. But I think by working with Cerdant and the professionals at Cerdant, you will be able to use these funds in a way to not just build out a piece of the network, but you can build out the entire network by layering these different funds. Now, each one of these funds are independent of each other, but if done correctly, you can use these funds on top of each other to really build out a robust, secure, high-performing network.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. We think so, but thank you for reiterating that. And I know we're short on time. And one more thing that I wanted to ask you, pick your brain on is, I mentioned a few broad, kind of vague examples of, what we've seen school districts do to come together and excel. But, can you think of any particular use cases of, any school districts across the country or any particular situation where you feel like they found the secret sauce and leveraging this based on their specific situation that you feel like is a great example for other districts to draw from?
Gosh, I'd love to be able to name drop, but I haven't actually gotten green light to name drop any of these. But I can tell you there's some situations that we've come across where SonicWall has what's called a 15700. It's our flagship high-end firewall. There has been several installations across the East Coast to where we've been able to use the performance and scalability of that particular appliance to really encompass an entire school district or school. And we've seen enormous success with schools using ESSER or ESSER 2 funds, using that type of technology to really upgrade and give their networks quite a performance boost and jump that they've been looking for. Now, I know that sounds like I'm pitching the SonicWall thing, but that's where I'm at. I'm pitching the SonicWall thing, but it's true. And that those are some of the areas we've seen. We've also seen this last ERate season, we've seen some really great traction within our access points and our Wi-Fi solution. It's a nice, robust, solid, state-of-the-art solution that's there, and it works fantastic. So as far as calling out certain districts and schools, I wish I was better prepared for that question, but I'm not, and I don't know that I can actually throw somebody out there by name right now.
No, that's okay. And I think the 15700 is the perfect example, because we've seen that just make mountains of difference in a few different school districts over the past year in leveraging these funds, and just the ability to scale. But not just meet the needs, but put them in a position where they're covered for the needs, but growth for the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And that, I think any school district can attest that being built for growth is the only way, the only way they can succeed.
Absolutely.
So ERate, so you mentioned ERate, that I would love to wrap up with that, because we can't forget ERate. Obviously, it's something that's always been around. It continues to be around. It's not, not part of these rounds of funding, but it is unaffected by these rounds of funding. And that's what I feel like we need to remind people of, that it is still here. We're about to, we're hitting the new season of ERate, and it's just, again, continues to be a tool in the toolbox.
Absolutely. So last funding cycle, we started the new 5-year funding window for ERate. Mm-hmm. So there's still plenty of money and plenty of opportunity within the ERate itself, the ERate budget itself. And again, like you said, kicking off July 1st, bam, we're back into the ERate 470, 471 season, and we're off running. So we're excited and looking forward to that. And again, SonicWall has expanded the play a little bit within ERate. Now, our switch is new. We haven't had a switch before. We had it last year in some limited form, but now we've got a switch that we can put into play within ERate, along with our access points and firewalls. Now, I want to stress something on our switch, okay? I'm not looking at going after the big Cisco or Juniper switches. That's not our play here. But when you're looking at an SD branch solution where you're pulling in CCTV cameras and phones and maybe some type of remote locks and all that kind of stuff within a school or even within a district, our switches are phenomenal. It's a great SD branch solution. And people may think, well, whatever, it's a school, don't worry about that. I want to remind people of one thing. A Las Vegas casino was taken down. Their network was taken down by a digital thermostat on a fish aquarium, all right, on a fish aquarium. So let's not let our schools be infected, get hacked, taken, ransomware attack, right? Or let's not let our kids be subject to some kind of, crazy stuff online because somebody got in through a digital thermometer.
Right. Something silly. The expansion of IoT just continues to be the best and worst in some cases, but I'll attest to the applicability of the switches, especially in these environments. It's really the perfect size and the perfect fit. Like you said, no, it's not replacing a core switch or any major data center installation. So it's really perfect for the setting.
Yep. And with IoT, man, whether it's a light bulb, a thermostat, or who knows what, it's got to be protected. If it's on your network, it has to be protected.
Yep, it's a factor. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Well, Loren, thank you for taking some time to chat with me for this edition of Cerdant Bytes. And is there anything else that I forgot? Any other information we want to wrap up with?
You know what? No, I think we hit all the high points. I just want to thank you for allowing me to come on and be on Cerdant Bytes. This is a really cool platform. Hopefully I get invited back to do another one. I'd love to do another one. And, I just urge all the folks listening to this webcast, please get a hold of Cerdant. They're an expert, and they can help take care of your IT needs, and let them help you with performance and security.
Well, thanks, Lauren. Thanks for always being a great partner, and I'll provide some helpful links at the end of this as well. So
excellent.
Enjoy your day, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.